Okay, I got it.
Ooh.
Ew, it's huge. What is that thing doing in her ear?
The little girl hadn't screamed when the car bomb went off. She just stood there, 4 years old, blood on her pink dress, glass in her hair, her mother's body burning 6 feet behind her, staring at the flames with eyes that didn't blink. Not because she was brave, because she couldn't hear the explosion. She couldn't hear anything, not anymore. And the woman sprinting toward her through the smoke. A black single mother with a hearing-impaired son of her own. A woman who hadn't eaten since yesterday, whose rent was 3 weeks late, who had no business being anywhere near this parking garage, had exactly 9 seconds before the second bomb detonated. 9 seconds to save a child she'd never met. 9 seconds that would destroy everything she knew. 9 seconds that would put her directly in the crosshairs of the most dangerous man in Chicago's underworld. And he was the girl's father. But here's the thing they never tell you about 9 seconds. It's not enough time to think. It's not enough time to weigh consequences or calculate risk or ask yourself if this is a good idea. 9 seconds is only enough time to be who you really are. And Naomi Jackson, broke, exhausted, terrified, was a woman who ran toward fire. She'd been cutting through the parking garage of the Lakeshore Grand Hotel on her way to a cleaning shift. She was already 12 minutes late for when the first explosion turned the world white. The shockwave knocked her sideways into a concrete pillar, and for a disoriented moment, she was 17 again, back on the south side, diving behind a dumpster while gunshots cracked through the summer air like fireworks that killed. But this wasn't gunfire. This was something engineered, something massive and deliberate and designed to erase someone from the earth. Naomi's ears rang. Her vision swam. Smoke rolled through the garage in thick gray waves, turning headlights into smeared halos and exit signs into bleeding red ghosts. Through the haze and the orange pulse of flames eating through a black SUV, she saw the child. Standing perfectly still, pink dress, patent leather shoes, 2 neat braids that someone had done with love that morning, not knowing it would be the last morning. The girl's mouth was open. No sound came out. Around her, the world was screaming, car alarms, cracking concrete, the deep-throated roar of a fuel fire reaching for oxygen, and she stood in the center of all that noise in perfect, terrible silence. Because she couldn't hear any of it. Naomi ran. Glass crunched beneath her work shoes. Heat pressed against her face like an open oven. She scooped the girl with one arm light, impossibly light, like holding a paper doll, and kept running. Behind her, the second blast punched through the garage with a sound like God slamming a door. The floor buckled. A column cracked. The ceiling rained concrete dust that turned the air white, and the sound was so loud it became silence. Total, absolute, the kind of quiet that lives inside explosions. Naomi made it to the stairwell, slammed through the door, collapsed on the landing with the girl pressed against her chest, both of them coated in ash and blood that belonged to neither of them. The girl looked up at Naomi. Dark eyes. Ancient eyes. Eyes that had no business being in a 4-year-old's face. And she raised one small hand and touched Naomi's cheek, her fingertips tracing the tracks of tears Naomi didn't know she'd been crying. No words, no crying, no sound at all. Just a touch that said, "I see you. Even though everything is broken, I see you." Naomi held her tighter and whispered into her hair, a promise the girl couldn't hear but Naomi needed to say. "I hear you, baby. I hear you." She didn't know those words would come back to save them all. The police came, then the fire trucks, then the men in black suits who moved through the emergency responders like sharks through a school of fish, quiet, purposeful, untouchable. They spoke Korean. They carried no badges, and they took the little girl from Naomi's arms with the careful efficiency of people retrieving something priceless from a wreckage. "Wait," Naomi reached for the child. "She needs a hospital, she needs her father." The man who spoke had a scar running from his left ear to his jawline. He didn't look at Naomi like she was a person. He looked at her like she was a variable in an equation, something to be noted and dismissed. They took the girl. The girl didn't cry, didn't reach back, just watched Naomi over the scarred man's shoulder as they carried her away, those dark ancient eyes holding Naomi's gaze until the smoke swallowed them both. Naomi went home, sat on her kitchen floor in the dark, and shook for 3 hours straight while her 6-year-old son slept in the next room, dreaming whatever dreams deaf children dream, silent and vivid, and full of the colors that sound can't touch. 14 months later, Naomi's life had gotten smaller. Not worse, exactly. She'd survived worse, just smaller. The cleaning job at the hotel had evaporated after the bombing. She'd cycled through 3 more positions since then. Home aide, gas station night shift. Currently, weekday coordinator at the Southside Community Center for the Deaf, a position that paid barely enough to keep the lights on but gave her son, Elijah, free access to the best deaf education program in the neighborhood. Elijah was 6, born profoundly deaf. Brown-skinned, bright-eyed, and so fiercely intelligent that he made Naomi feel like she was the one being raised. He sat across the table from her now, his small hands moving through sign language with the fluid confidence of a child who'd never known any other way to speak. He was telling her about a caterpillar he'd found on the sidewalk, his face lit up like a small sun, every emotion visible because deaf children learn early that their bodies are their voices. Then he stopped mid-sign, pointed across the playroom. "Mom, the new girl isn't signing back." Naomi looked. In the corner of the playroom on the carpet, a little girl sat alone. Korean, 5 years old now but still small for her age. Expensive dress, the kind that cost more than Naomi's rent. Hair in 2 braids, the same face. The same ancient, unreachable eyes that Naomi had last seen disappearing into smoke 14 months ago. Naomi's coffee cup hit the floor. She didn't hear it break. The girl's name was Minji. She'd been enrolled that morning by a man who'd left no phone number, no emergency contact, no medical records, just a cashier's check for a full year's tuition and a handwritten note in precise, angular script. She cannot hear. Teach her. 3 sentences, no signature, as if a child's entire existence could fit on a post-it note. Naomi knelt in front of Minji. The girl didn't react, didn't blink, didn't flinch. She was present the way a photograph is present, surface without depth, image without life. Naomi had worked with deaf children for 15 years, and she had never seen a child this far inside herself. This wasn't communication difficulty. This was a child who had decided that reaching out was dangerous. That connection meant loss. That the last time she trusted the world, it exploded. Naomi signed slowly. "Hello, my name is Naomi. We met before. There was a fire. I carried you. Do you remember?" Nothing. Silence so thick it had texture. "You're safe here," Naomi signed. "I hear you." A flicker, microscopic. A hairline fracture in the wall Minji had built. Then it sealed shut, and her eyes went flat again. The answer to why walked through the door 3 hours later. 3 men in black suits. The tallest one had that scar, ear to jaw, and Naomi recognized him like recognizing a nightmare you'd had more than once. "The child, we're here for her." Naomi stepped into the doorway. "She hasn't been signed out. There's a process. Her father dropped her here without medical records, without emergency contacts, without the basic decency of mentioning she's deaf and traumatized. He doesn't get to send Muscle to collect her. He comes himself. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., with her full medical history, her audiological assessment, and an explanation for why this child looks like she hasn't been held in a year." The scarred man stared at her with the blank patience of a man who carried weapons professionally. "You should know who her father is before you make demands." "I don't care if he's God." "He's not God." A pause. "He's Seongjin, the architect." Karen, the receptionist, grabbed Naomi's arm after they left. "Tell me you didn't just summon the man who controls everything between Chinatown and the Gold Coast to a parent conference." Naomi's hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against her thighs. "If he can run an empire, he can show up for his daughter." He came at dawn 3 days later. The black Rolls-Royce appeared at the curb, like a shadow gaining mass. 2 SUVs flanked it. The rear door opened, and Seongjin stepped onto the cracked sidewalk of the south side, and the gray morning light seemed to rearrange itself to accommodate him. He was mid-30s, sharp-featured, lean, eyes so dark they didn't reflect light, they consumed it. Charcoal suit that fit like a second skin. He moved like a man who'd learned that stillness was power and unnecessary motion was weakness. And he was carrying Minji on his hip, her small hand fisted in his lapel, her sleeping face pressed against his shoulder. The way he held her, tight, deliberate, careful, the way you hold something you love and are terrified of losing, put the first crack in Naomi's armor. "You're the woman who gave my men orders." His English was precise, clipped, accented just enough to remind you it wasn't his first language. "I'm the woman who runs this program, and you're the man who dropped off a traumatized deaf child like she was dry cleaning. Come inside." Something flickered across his face, not anger, something closer to recognition. As if no one had spoken to him like that in years, maybe decades, maybe ever. He walked in. She told him the truth in the playroom. No padding, no diplomacy. She sat across from this man whose name made police commissioners return phone calls at 3 a.m. and told him his daughter was drowning. Minji lost her hearing the same day she lost her mother. Her brain now associates sound disappearing with the worst moment of her life. Every specialist you've hired has tried to fix her ears. Nobody has tried to reach her heart. Naomi leaned forward. She's been surrounded by hearing people for 14 months, people whose mouths move but produce nothing she can understand. She thinks she's invisible. She thinks she's alone. She asked me, Naomi's voice caught. She didn't ask me exactly, but in her assessment responses, when I used visual cues, she indicated something that translates roughly to, "Am I dead too?" The room went still. "A 5-year-old girl has spent over a year wondering if she died alongside her mother," Naomi said quietly, "because nobody in her world can tell her otherwise in a language she can access." Jin Young's hands were gripping his knees so hard the tendons stood out like cables. His face was carved stone. But his eyes were crumbling from the inside, the way a building looks fine from the street while the interior collapses floor by floor. "I cannot reach her." The words came out like a confession dragged across broken glass. "I hold her. She looks through me. I speak. She hears nothing. I am her father and I am—" He stopped, swallowed. "Nothing." "Then stop speaking," Naomi said, "and learn to sign, because your daughter doesn't need a father who talks. She needs a father whose hands can say what his voice can't." Elijah cracked the code. Not Naomi, not the specialists, not the $300 an hour therapists Jin Young had flown in from 3 continents. A 6-year-old boy who had never heard a single sound in his life sat down next to Minji on the 4th day and started drawing. Not communicating, not demanding, just being present, creating, a dog with absurdly large ears, a house where smoke spelled out the word HI, a son wearing sunglasses and looking annoyed about it. On the 7th drawing, a girl with black hair holding hands with a boy with brown skin, standing in a field of stars. Minji reached out. Her fingertip touched the paper, traced the outline of the brown-skinned boy. Elijah looked at her, pointed at himself, then signed one word. "Friend." Minji's hand lifted, shaking, wrong, clumsy, beautiful beyond language. She tried to copy the sign. Naomi turned away so no one would see her cry. After that, the dam broke. 20 signs in 3 weeks. Sentences by week 6. Jagged, raw, desperate sentences that poured out of Minji like water from a crack in a dam that had held too long. Mama gone, fire came. Loud light then no sound forever. Everybody talks but I can't hear. I scream but nobody comes. Am I dead too? Am I dead? Naomi knelt in front of her, took her face in both hands, signed with hands that trembled but did not hesitate. "You are alive, you are here, and I hear you, baby, I will always hear you." Minji climbed into Naomi's lap, pressed her ear against Naomi's chest, and listened to the only sound she could still perceive, a heartbeat, steady and strong and alive. She stayed there for 45 minutes, and Naomi held her and rocked her and let her feel what alive sounded like from the inside. Welcome back, beautiful souls. If you're still here, you're not a viewer, you're family. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me what's hitting you hardest. I promise you, you're not ready for what comes next. Jin Young learned sign language the way he did everything else, with ferocious, obsessive precision. He came to the center every evening, sat in a plastic chair built for a child, and let Naomi reshape his hands. He was terrible. His signing was rigid, mechanical, commanding, the language of a man who'd spent his life issuing orders, not expressing feelings. Sign language requires your face, your body, your whole emotional architecture on display, and Seongjin had spent 2 decades building walls around his emotions and calling it strength. "You're signing like you're threatening someone," Naomi told him during the 5th lesson, standing behind him, her hands over his, guiding his fingers into softer shapes. She could feel the calluses on his palms, the tension in his wrists, his pulse against her fingertips, fast and steady, like a man running a race he refused to lose. "This sign means I love you. Your face has to show it. If your face is a wall, she'll hit it and walk away." "I don't show what I feel." "Then your daughter will never hear you. Not with hearing aids, not with implants, not with any technology on Earth, because what she needs to hear isn't sound. It's you." He turned his head slightly. Their faces were close. She could smell cedar and something metallic and the particular exhaustion of a man holding an empire together with his bare hands. "Show me again," he said. She did, night after night. The most feared man in Chicago sat in a plastic chair and learned to say "you're my heart" with hands that had ended lives. And something shifted between them during those lessons, something neither acknowledged, something that lived in the space between her fingers and his, in the way her breath caught when he finally got a sign right, in the way his eyes tracked her across the room when she wasn't looking. Naomi ignored it. She had practice ignoring impossible things. She was a single black mother on the south side of Chicago. Impossible was the zip code. The first time Minji signed to her father, the world stopped. Tuesday evening. Rain. Jinyoung walked in, knelt on the scuffed linoleum, and signed with hands that still trembled but no longer locked. "Hello, my heart. How was your day?" Minji studied his hands, studied his face, looked at Naomi across the room. Naomi nodded. Minji turned back to her father. Her small hands rose like birds learning to fly. "Good. Elijah drew me a butterfly. I drew you. We're flying together." Jinyoung's composure didn't crack. It detonated. Silently, the way controlled demolitions bring buildings down inward, total, structural. His eyes went glassy. His jaw clenched so hard Naomi could see the muscles spasm beneath his skin. He pulled Minji against his chest and held her, his face buried in her hair, his shoulders shaking with the kind of grief that men who have been taught never to cry carry like shrapnel, deep, permanent, agonizing. Minji signed against his back. Only Naomi could see it. "Why is Daddy shaking?" Naomi signed back, tears falling freely now. "Because he can hear you. For the first time, he can hear you." What Naomi didn't know was that 3 men sat in a white van across the street with telephoto lenses, capturing every frame. The photos were on a desk in a Chinatown high-rise by midnight, and the man behind that desk, Kwon Di-ho, studied them the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, looking for the fracture, looking for where to cut. Kwon Di-ho had been Jinyoung's second-in-command for 11 years. His shadow, his strategist, the man who built the infrastructure while the architect drew the blueprints. But shadows grow ambitious when they realize they've been doing the work while someone else takes the light. Di-ho had been engineering a takeover for 3 years, quietly buying loyalty, redirecting money, whispering to the council that the architect was losing his edge. All he needed was proof, evidence that Jinyoung had a crack in his foundation. Now he had photographs of the most feared man in Chicago, weeping in a community center, while a woman in second-hand shoes taught him to talk with his fingers. Di-ho picked up his phone. 2 words, begin. The warning came at 2 a.m., glass-breaking, deliberate, methodical, professional. Naomi was out of bed before the sound finished, moving on pure South Side instinct. Elijah's room, 5 steps. She crossed them in 3, swept him up, bathroom, lock, phone. Boots on hardwood, slow, searching. This wasn't a robbery, this was choreography. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. "Ms. Jackson." The voice was cultured, amused. "My name is Kwon Di-ho. I believe we have a mutual interest in Seongjin. though our interests diverge considerably. There's someone in my apartment. A messenger, he's leaving photographs on your kitchen table. Consider them a visual essay on why proximity to Jinyoung is inadvisable. A sip of something. A pause. The girl is a pressure point. You've made yourself an extension of that pressure point. Walk away. 48 hours. If you come near my son. I have no interest in your son. I have interest in the man who runs a $2 billion empire and has started learning finger puppets in a building that smells like crayons. The line went dead. The apartment went silent. 20 minutes later, Naomi opened the bathroom door. On the kitchen table, beside Elijah's cereal bowl, photographs. Naomi and Minji at the center. Elijah at the park. Her mother's house in Gary, Indiana. Every image a coordinate on a map of everything she could lose. She sat at that table until dawn. She didn't shake. Something colder than fear had taken root. Something that felt like the moment before a mother goes to war. At 7, she drove to Chinatown. She laid the photographs on Jinyoung's desk like evidence. He studied each one. When he reached the photo of Elijah laughing, head back, joy frozen and weaponized, his expression didn't change. But the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Diho," he said, "my brother, my shadow." The word brother sounded like a wound. "He's using my daughter to prove I'm weak, and he's using your son to make you run." "I'm not running." "I know." He stood, crossed the room, stood close. "That's what terrifies me more than anything Diho can do." He reached up and touched her face, one finger tracing the line of her jaw, and the gentleness of it from those hands unmade something she'd been holding together for 6 years. "You walked into smoke for my daughter. Let me stand in front of the fire for your son." "I don't need a protector, Jinyoung." "You need a partner." His voice dropped. "I have never had one, not truly. My wife Minji's mother, she feared me. She was right to, but you don't fear me. You look at me and see the man who can't talk to his own daughter, and somehow that makes you brave enough to stay. I don't understand it, but I need it." Naomi closed her eyes, felt his hand against her skin. Let herself, for one moment, lean into the warmth of someone offering to carry weight she'd been dragging alone. "Then we do this together," she said. "But on my terms. Elijah and I stay in our home. We go to the center. We live our lives. Your protection stays invisible. I won't raise my son in a cage, Jinyoung, not even a golden one." The ghost of a smile. "You are the most impossible woman I have ever met." "You clearly haven't met enough women." The attack came 8 days later. At the community center, 2:30 in the afternoon. 14 children inside. The front window exploded inward. A canister bounced across the playroom floor and erupted white smoke. Tear gas. The children couldn't hear the hiss, but they felt it, eyes burning, lungs seizing, the primal terror of air that hurt to breathe. Naomi moved on autopilot. She grabbed children 2 at a time and pushed them toward Karen and the back door. She found Minji under a table, curled into herself, hands over her eyes. And beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his small body positioned between her and the chaos, was Elijah. 6 years old, tears streaming from the gas, shielding someone else's daughter with his own body. Naomi swept them both up, one under each arm, ran blind through smoke, hit the back door with her shoulder, stumbled into the alley and kept running. 3 blocks. 4. Behind her, gunshots, tires screaming. She called Jinyoung. 1 ring. The center, gas, shooting, the children. 4 minutes, the Rolls Royce. He took Minji from Naomi's arms and held her, eyes closed, face in her hair. 5 seconds of naked terror. Then he opened his eyes, knelt in front of Elijah, and signed with shaking hands. "Thank you. You are the bravest person I know." Elijah, still trembling, signed back. "She's my friend. I hear her even when nobody else does." Those words, "I hear her," hit Naomi like lightning, because they were her words. The words she'd whispered in a burning parking garage. The words she'd signed to Minji in the playroom. Passed down from mother to son like a prayer, carried forward by a 6-year-old boy who understood, instinctively, what it meant to hear someone who had no voice. The penthouse, 40 floors up. The children asleep on the couch, Minji's head on Elijah's shoulder, his hand holding hers. Naomi at the window, Jin-young beside her. Diho will go to the council tonight, Jin-young said. He'll present the photos, call for a vote. If he wins, he takes everything, territory, money, alliances, and then he eliminates what he sees as my vulnerabilities. A pause that weighed 1,000 pounds, starting with Minji. What's your plan? I go to the meeting. I face the council. I outmaneuver him. And if you can't? Silence. Naomi turned to him. Take me with you. Absolutely not. Take me with you, Jin-young. Her voice was iron wrapped in velvet. Diho's entire argument is that I've made you weak, that a woman and a deaf child have compromised the architect. So let him say it to my face. Let him look at the woman who runs a community center on the south side and tell a room full of powerful men that she's the reason their empire is crumbling. Her eyes burned. Because the truth is the opposite. I didn't make you weak. I made you someone worth following. And those men need to see that with their own eyes. Jin-young stared at her for a long time. If something happens to you in that room, then it happens. But I didn't survive that parking garage and raising a deaf son alone and 3 jobs and no sleep and a break-in and a tear gas attack on children to hide in a penthouse while someone else fights for my family. She took his hand, his lethal, shaking, signing hand. We do this together. You said that. You meant it. So mean it now. He lifted her hand to his mouth, pressed his lips against her knuckles. A gesture so old-world, so impossibly tender from a man made of edges and empire, that Naomi's breath caught like a bird in a closed fist. Together, he said. The warehouse, industrial waterfront, midnight. 14 men sat around a table that had decided Chicago's fate for 2 decades. The air smelled like concrete and cigar smoke, and the particular musk of men who believed themselves untouchable. Diho stood at the head of the table, photographs spread before him like a prosecutor's evidence. The door opened. Jin-young walked in. Naomi walked in beside him. Every head turned. Every eye locked on the woman who did not belong in this room, the woman in a second-hand coat and shoes that had run through tear gas, who held her chin level and her gaze steady, and looked at a table of crime lords the same way she looked at unruly children in a playroom, without flinching, without apology. Diho's confident smile flickered. This wasn't in his script. Who is this? One of the council members asked. This, Jin-young said, is the woman Diho is so afraid of. Diho recovered quickly. A display of sentimentality, how fitting. He gestured at the photographs. Gentlemen, the evidence speaks for itself. Jin-young has been compromised, crying in public, learning hand signals, neglecting operations to sit in a charity building with deaf children, Naomi said. The room went quiet. She stepped forward. Every survival instinct she'd ever developed screamed at her to stop, but she'd spent 6 years learning to walk toward fire, and this fire was no different from any other. Mr. Kwon, 8 days ago, you sent men to tear gas a building with 14 deaf children inside. Children who couldn't hear the canister hit the floor. Children who couldn't call for help. Children who breathed poison because you needed a photograph of their terror to strengthen your argument. She looked around the table, met each pair of eyes. My son is 6 years old. He's been deaf since birth. He was in that building. He covered a little girl's body with his own because that's what brave people do, they protect. Her voice didn't waver, didn't rise. I don't know your rules, I don't know your codes, I don't know what honor means in this world. But I know this. Any man who attacks children to seize power will burn the thing he's seizing. Not because someone stops him, because that's what men like that do. They destroy everything they touch. She reached into her coat. The room tensed. Hands moved toward weapons. She pulled out a drawing. Minji's drawing. The one of a girl with black hair and a boy with brown skin holding hands in a field of stars. She placed it on the table, beside Diho's photographs. That is what your colleague tried to destroy. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the room. A 5-year-old girl's first drawing since she watched her mother die. Her first act of reaching out. Her first proof that she's still alive. She looked at Diho. You attacked that. That is who you are. And every man at this table knows that a leader who wages war on children's drawings will eventually wage war on them. The silence that followed had weight. Physical, measurable weight that pressed against every person in the room. Jinyoung spoke. Vote. 13 hands, 12 for Jinyoung, 1 Dihos for himself. Diho was escorted out by men who'd once followed his orders. What happened after, Naomi didn't ask. Some doors only open one direction. Dawn, the penthouse, gold light spilling across the floor like something holy. Jinyoung found Naomi on the couch, Minji in her lap, Elijah curled against her side. The three of them tangled together like a sentence that finally made grammatical sense. Subject, verb, object, all in the right places for the first time. He sat on the floor beside them, didn't wake them, just watched. Let himself feel the full, staggering weight of having something worth losing, something worth changing for, something worth becoming a different kind of architect, one who builds with open hands instead of closed fists. Minji stirred, opened her eyes, saw her father sitting on the floor in his wrinkled suit, exhaustion carved into every line of his face, looking at her like she was the only blueprint that mattered. She reached out, touched his cheek. The same gesture she'd made in the parking garage 2 years ago, when a stranger named Naomi had carried her out of the fire. Then she signed, slowly, carefully, each word placed like a stone in a foundation. Daddy, you stayed. 2 words, the 2 most important words in any language, the words every child needs to hear. The words that meant, you didn't disappear, you didn't leave. The world exploded and you're still here. Jinyoung gathered her against his chest, where she pressed her ear over his heart and listened to the only sound she could still hear, steady, strong, alive. And he signed against her back, the words Naomi had taught him, the words that had traveled from a burning parking garage through a community center, playroom through sign language lessons in plastic chairs through a warehouse showdown, and finally, arrived where they were always meant to go. I hear you, baby. I hear you. Naomi opened her eyes, watched them, and Elijah, stirring beside her, watched too. He tugged his mother's sleeve and signed the question that would define the architecture of the rest of their lives. Mom, are they our family now? Naomi looked at Jinyoung. He was looking back at her over his daughter's shoulder, and his eyes, those dark, consuming, terrifying eyes, were soft, open, unguarded for the first time since she'd known him. His face wasn't a wall anymore. It was a window, and behind it she could see everything, the fear, the hope, the love he'd never learned to say out loud but was learning, word by word, sign by sign, to say with his hands. She signed back to Elijah, her vision blurring, her heart so full it ached against her ribs like something trying to grow past the space it was given. Yes, baby, I think they are. Minji saw the signs, looked at Elijah, then at Naomi, then at her father. And she signed something none of them expected, something she'd never been taught, something that came from whatever place inside a child holds the things that don't need learning because they're born knowing. Family hears each other, even when it's quiet, even when the sound is gone. Family hears. And outside the window, 40 floors above a city that had tried to tear them apart with bombs and gas and photographs and fear, the sun came up. Not dramatically, not cinematically. Just the way real things happen, ordinary light falling on extraordinary people who'd found each other in the smoke, and the silence and the impossible space between 2 worlds that should never have touched. But they touched, and they held, and they heard each other, and they didn't let go.